Many people who eat fish have no idea of the hard work and danger the fishermen go through to catch it. In the old days of sail and oar, before engines were installed in boats, it was an even harder task, and one which many boatmen on Dill and Walmer Beach turned to, as sail started to be replaced by steam. In the late 1890s, salvage work and ships requiring assistance was becoming a rare occurrence. The boatmen turned to commercial fishing and to put out pots to catch the lively lobster. These always fetched a good penny, and pots were set to catch the lovely wilk, which, when cooked with a handful of salt and served with a sprinkle of vinegar, was absolutely delicious and made a very filling meal. Herrings were a common fish, eaten by many, and satisfied the palate of everyone. Many of the herring landed were smoked and turned into bloaters. A few minutes under the grill cooking and they were delicious. Herrings were always sold in numbers in the old days and not by weight, and went like this: 4 herrings made 1 warp, 30 warp made the 100, this is a long 100, 1,000 herrings to the cran basket, and 10,000 herrings, or 10 cran, made a last. The boatman always counted 33 warp to the 100, that's 132 herring. This was to allow for gillers when the fishmongers bought them for smoking into bloaters, as herring with no gills could not be skilled onto a spit. Gillers were also called tie-tails. These normally sold far cheaper, but ate the same. Fishing for herring normally started in late September in the old days and ran through until the new year. This was the time of the year when the fish were at their prime and full of delicious roe. Herring which had shot their roes were called shallacers and had very small saleable value, owing to the depletion of oil in their flesh. A second run of spring herring came in during late February to March, but there wasn't much call for the outer season fish, as the oil quality in them was poor. The first week in November nearly always saw the start of the sprat season. The boatmen used 16-foot long boats called cod punts for sprat fishing and were usually away no longer than 3 hours. During this short season, sprats used to come close inshore in huge shoals, and the boatmen, fishing with their drift nets, could easily catch 3 or 4 lasts, which represented a good catch. A last is 10,000 fish, and it was not unusual for the boats to return ashore loaded up to the gunwales with sprats. Sprats were not expensive and usually sold for around £1 and 9p to 2 shillings a last in the 1890s. Smoked sprats, like herring, are delicious and sold for 20 for a penny. Many of the sprats caught in years now past were sent to Edgar's, the fish factory in Sandown Road, where they were tinned and sold as sardines. These were exported widely across the UK and Europe. November through to March also saw the arrival of cod, whiting and skate in large numbers, a rare occurrence these days. Long lines up to half a mile long, with hooks attached every 2 fathoms along their length, were baited up with sprats and set on the seabed. These were left over the high tide and hauled in at slack water. That's when the tide had eased off. The prospect of coming ashore with a large catch was always anticipated and happened quite frequently. March normally brought the coming of easterly winds, a welcome wind which drove the small spotted dogfish, or huss as it was known, closer into the shore, making an appearance in larger numbers in the channel. Once again this was a favourite on the dinner table and made a cheap meal. Skinned and split down, then fried in a portion of beef dripping, it had a taste like no other fish. And the skinned belly, which when cooked rolled up like 2 small sticks of rock, was even more delicious. Huss were caught using trammel nets. These were long nets of around 30 fathoms each in length, with corks along their headline every 4 feet and a piece of lead pipe every 2 feet along the lead line. Each end of the net had a weighted pole attached to it to help the net stay upright in the flowing tide. They had an anchor attached to each end, to which was attached 30 fathoms of cable and a dan with a flag marking their position to make recovery easy. These nets were laid on the seabed and hauled every 12 hours to clear the catch of huss. It was common for 50 or more score to be landed on a good day, and with an easterly wind blowing, catches would be even heavier. In the 1970s I was still commercial fishing for huss. The fish were all skinned and sold on the beach for 20p each. Hard work, but it paid the bills. Many of my big catches were made in easterly gales working along the West Goodwin banks, a dangerous place as nets could only be hauled and shot at low water. The seas were too rough on the high tide. Fishing in those long ago days was hard work. The beach boats never had winches or hydraulics. All the nets were hauled by hand, unlike the modern day fishing boats, which have machines to do hard work. The price of fish was very cheap and was an everyday meal for most families.